5. Lear awoke to 3 Picts carrying him. His head throbbed and the sky was dark. It was night, and the insects were singing. The hunters had a tight grip on his limbs. He tried to struggle against them, but strong as he was not stronger than 3 men. He managed to get one of his legs loose, but before he could kick with it, a 4th hunter, the stranger Arnak, grabbed his leg. "Let go of me," the Cimmerian shouted as he tried to kick again. Arnak spoke. "The poor boy is nervous. He's been kept a virgin, and he's afraid to be measured to the standards of Pictish men." The hunters all laughed. They were nearing the cave now, and its lattice gate. The men opened the gate and threw Lear roughly inside. "Carefully, Cimmerian. She bites," teased one.
"She's a forest demon. She'll gobble you up,"
said another. Frightened from the supernatural events at the clearing, Lear took their taunts at face value. He had heard whispers that whatever laid in wait in this dark cave ate part of a man's soul. He threw himself against the gate, but one of the hunters jabbed at him with his spear. Lear stopped. "Well, I must go to your master's hut," Arnak said. "Last as long as you can." Arnak made a disappointed face, and the other Picts laughed. "Listen to me," Arnak shouted at him in Cimmerian. "If you hate Hotchkanook and would free your people, you must make a friend of the Ard Goswain. We need her help. You must not offend her. They only give their aid to those they love. You must make her love you. Do you understand?" Lear was stunned. He asked in his native tongue, "You speak Cimmerian?" Arnak switched back to Pictish. "The women tell me this is an old blessing. It's supposed to give the Cimmerian men the courage to perform. Such weaklings." The men all laughed. Arnak repeated his instructions in Cimmerian to Lear again, though this time with an even more teasing tone and slower pronunciation. Then he accompanied one of the hunters away from the gate. The other 2 remained. One of the Picts was drooling, and the other could not seem to stand fully upright. Lear turned to face the cave. All ahead of him was darkness and filled with eldritch dread. He would have longed to stay by the gate, but clearly if he loitered, one of the stupid Picts might ignore orders and stab him. Once again, having had his choice removed, he ventured forward. In the darkness of the cave he had a momentary vision of one of the ghostly goddess's arms beckoning him deeper. "Go away. Either give me an instruction or go away, you useless bents," he growled. He pondered again if perhaps he was simply insane. If all that had happened to him in the clearing, at the stones, and the dreams and visions was nothing more than head trauma, he had learned in his lessons that those struck in the head could change and see things that were not there. From ahead of him he heard a song. He felt he knew the words, yet they seemed oddly unfamiliar. The vocalist was a woman. Her voice was clear and ethereal. She sounded very sad. Whatever it was she was singing, it was clearly a lament. Lear was not sure if he should call out to her, or if it was better to observe her first. He decided upon the latter. He inched forward, feeling like he was traveling a great distance, but in fact he had barely gone more than 50 feet. Ahead of him he could see the soft glow of moonlight. It shone through a hole high above them in the top of the cave. The light revealed a strange, subterranean abode. Along the walls of the cave there were wooden carvings of men and animals. Stones sat in piles like those that had been in the clearing. Everywhere Lear looked, he saw swirls and swirls. There seemed nowhere the strange marks were not present. He peered at them and noticed they glimmered with moonlight. Whatever they had been drawn in, or painted with, did not reflect light, but stored it. His eyes strayed to the center of the chamber, and he noticed a female figure standing in the shaft of the moonbeam. She had long, snow-white hair. Her skin was green as grass. Silver whorls decorated her skin as another woman would wear a gown, and those decorations were all that she wore. She was reaching toward the sky, and her eyes were closed. Lear was struck by how short she was. Had it not been for her alien skin tone, he would have thought her to be little more than 14 years of age. Yet he knew that she had to be far older, for the men of the village had referred to her as being the mother of all the children present. Lear was about to call out to her when he stumbled over a root of a bewitched tree. He pitched forward and barely caught himself in time. When he looked up, she was no longer within the light. He peered about him, looking for wherever it was she had disappeared to. He did not have to wait long. As she emerged from the shadows, Lear swallowed hard. I, he began. She was incredibly beautiful. Lear could not take his eyes from her. You not picked, she said to him in Pictish. You are... He found he could not breathe normally. He deduced that this was not fear. There was some scent in the air near her that was overpowering him. Pheromones? Lear thought. Like some animals emit. She's doing something to my mind, to my body. She neared him and took a hold of his hand. He had scratched his palms when he landed on the floor. The strange woman licked them, and the minor wounds ceased to pain him. They closed, and soon were naught but scars. She looked again into his eyes. Whatever it was she saw, it caused her to smile. She pointed to his eyes, and then to her own. Both she and Lear possessed the same pale yellow orbs. "Like me!" she exclaimed. Lear uttered, mine are a curse. They should be blue." She wrinkled her nose and shook her head in a negative gesture. "We always meant to have," she said, and pointed again to her eyes and then to his own. Lear's hand raised of its own accord, and before he noticed it, he was reaching for her. He stopped himself and pulled his hand back. "You afraid?" she asked. It was then that Lear noticed her Pictish was broken and full of pauses. He saw no point in being dishonest with her. Arnak had asked him to make an ally of her, to kill Hotchkanook and to free the women. He would pay any price to make that happen, even if it meant letting this inhuman creature harm him. "Yes, I am not a Pict. Yes, I am afraid," he admitted to her. "Why? You men not fear. Men strong. Men make others fear. Men make others hurt," she replied. Her expression conveyed she was remembering the less than tender visits that the Picts had paid her. "No, men should not do that," he said to her. She sniffed the air near him. She laid a palm on his chest. "You from where?" she asked. "I am a Cimmerian," he replied. "Kimmer? Kimmerson!" she exclaimed. Then she embraced him, and he was dumbstruck. She began speaking in another language he did not know. Her words flowed excitedly, and he could not follow. She bounced and wriggled like an excited child that was greeting a father who had come home from a long absence. He gently created space between them by placing his hands on her shoulders. Whatever it was her presence did to the air, it was severely affecting him. He felt himself uncomfortably erect, and a desire to embrace her and kiss her was strong in him. "I don't understand," he said in Pictish. "We are of Dawn," she explained. "We are of Plant Dawn, Kimmerson." "I don't know who Dawn or Kimmer are," he said. He realized he had said this in Cimmerian only after it had left his mouth. At the sound of his native tongue, she closed her eyes and let out a sigh. "We are of the same tribe," she said in Cimmerian, though it was an ancient form of the language. Lear had difficulty making sure he understood her correctly. "We are different. I am a Cimmerian. You are," he prompted. "She," she replied, then pointed to herself. She," she said. Then she pointed to Lear. "You, Kimmerson." "Okay. She," Lear said as he searched his knowledge. The words sounded like something he knew he should be familiar with. "You mean Oshi?" he asked. "Yes," she exclaimed. "Daughter of Dawn, Plant Dawn." A dim recollection of a name came to him. Some of the older Cimmerian legends spoke of Crom having a mother and father. Lear asked her, "Danu? Mother of Crom?" "Yes, yes," she squealed, embracing him before he could stop her, and bouncing up and down. "Kimmer!" "She is thousands of years old." or the stories she knows are. If I am right, the names are the same, but they have drifted in pronunciation due to age. Krawan mountain. She or her people are older than the Cataclysm, he thought. Long ago, there had been a catastrophe. It had nearly broken the world. The memory of it was recorded in the litanies Lear had learned. But these scraps of lore were but shadows of a history rich with kings and kingdoms now forgotten. The Oshi had been common in those days, the bards had sung. A people that were bound to the land, infused by it with power, and being a steward of it in return. At times the Sidhe would take a daughter of men, and by sorcerous arts bring her into their fold. Men at sometimes were also taken, but were almost always returned to the mortal world when the Sidhe had gained from them all they could offer as labor. Lear shuddered. He felt his very soul might be in danger. He tried to push her away, but was finding it harder to do so. His member ached, and the smell of her skin and her strange warmth were very alluring. He finally pushed her away as her lips touched his neck and planted a kiss there. "Wait! Wait!" he ordered. She looked at him with a wide smile and excited eyes. "I am Lear. What is your name?" he asked. "Shyle," she said. Then she placed both hands on his cheeks. "Shyle Nargag." He had trouble following the name. It was as old as her language. He placed his hands on her hands and said, "I am a slave of the Picts." At the mention of them her smile faded, and anger burned there. "Picts," she spat. "Why are you here?" he asked. She thrust a hand at the whorls upon the wall. "They take sunlight away. Little sunlight. I weak," she said. "I have seen the boys in the village who become men quickly. You are not what I would call weak," Lear said. She wrinkled her brow over his words. Then she quirked her head. "You want baby?" She reached for his groin before he could fully stop her. Her hands were on his belt before he plucked them away. It had taken a supreme effort of his will to offer this much resistance. "Perhaps if I stand away from her," he thought. He backpedaled and held up his hands. Her expression was confused. "I do not want a baby," he said. When she tried to step towards him again, he quickly added, "or to make a baby." He was emphatic about this point. Though it was a lie. He very much desired the strange woman, but he doubted she would want him in return if she had a choice. Recognition showed on the alien face. "You give me choice?" she asked. He nodded. Her hands covered her face. She began to heave and sob. Lear stood dumbstruck, not sure what he had done. It occurred to him that he had never heard of a legend in which a man refused the advances of the Oshi. Hoping he had not offended her, he approached her and tried to comfort her. He found himself flung to the ground and the alien woman on top of him. He felt her grip on his wrists and her lips on his chest. Her pelvis moved along his waist, and he groaned as he tried to resist her. She was laughing, giggling at the success of her ploy to tempt him near her. She lifted herself from him to look into his eyes. Her expression one of mirth and playful lust. "I choose Kemerson," she said. I have never..." He could not admit to it. Again she looked confused. She peered down at his loincloth and the swollen thing hidden beneath it. "Why not? It works," she observed. "It's not that," Lear managed, trying not to admit why he had never lain with a woman. "You like men?" Shyle asked. "No!" Lear roared indignantly. "Then why?" she asked. Lear's eyes winced. The air between them smelled heavily of apples now. His emotions were racing, and he was suddenly acutely aware of Deidre's rejection of him. He managed to growl, "No one wanted me." She blinked. Then she lowered her face so that all he could see was her eyes. "Then those women stupid," she said before she kissed him. After that he found he could not think, only feel. The sight of her in the moonlight, the scent of her body, and the warmth all overpowered his resolve. She traced some eldritch symbols over his chest, and then grasped his hands. He sensed that she had done something to increase the pleasure and duration of their coupling. Many times while they were coupling, he saw her spasm, and was afraid he had harmed her, only to hear her groan in relief and pull towards him harder. When the moment came that he was spent, she did not let him look away from her gaze. She held him fast to her, not letting him move. She stroked his back and hair with her fingers. "Lear," she whispered, "I never get to choose. Until you." I... He suddenly felt ashamed, as if he had used her basely. "Lear, I help you," Shael replied. She said, "I give you power. You kill Hachkanuk." "Yes," he promised. He had no idea how he would accomplish the feat. She nodded and said, "I give you power. You must give me power. We must be one." "I don't understand." Shael reached about them and grabbed a sharp stone. She cut a line upon her chest above her heart. She did not bleed like a woman would. Instead, something both pale, green, and white leaked from her skin. Lear was reminded of how mistletoe berries leaked when crushed. Then she handed the rock to Lear. He guessed at what she wanted him to do, cutting his own chest above his heart with the rock. Then she clasped him tightly to her, and the blood of their wounds mingled. "Be mine," she commanded. "Yes," he answered without thinking about the consequences. Then he mimicked her. "Be mine." "Always," she answered. Then she moved her hips in small circles to prove to him that it was true, and he could not help himself but respond. In the long house of the camp, Hachkanuk sat at the seat normally reserved for the chieftain. None questioned his right to sit there. Sumerian slave women served the Picts, as the elderly or matronly Pictish women sat far removed from the men. Arnak greeted the women as was proper when he entered. They gave him a dejected response. Eager to avoid all men, Arnak was accompanied by Cat and Oak. The two women remained demure, with their eyes cast downward. "Ah, friend Arnak, come sit next to me tonight," Hachkanuk said. "Gladly," Arnak replied. He sat cross-legged by the shaman, for the longhouse had no chairs. A slave woman brought him a bowl of succotash and a cup of water. Cat and Oak sat behind Arnak and awaited their orders. "We have much bounty here," Hachkanuk proclaimed to the Picts. "And why is that?" "Hachkanuk, Hachkanuk, Hachkanuk," the Picts chanted. They do not sound like Pictish warriors. They sound like proper Aquilonians, venerating their somber god or their enslaving emperor, Arnak thought. The shaman turned his attention to Arnak and asked, "So what are these conditions you would lay before me?" Arnak smiled. He replied, "Rather than allow the booty to be placed in a pile and divided as the ward leader, which would obviously be you, sees fit, instead each tribe shall keep whatever booty they can take from whoever it is they have slain. Be that weapons, tools, livestock, or women." Hachkanuk pondered. "Our tradition of the chieftain dividing booty is done so that there will not be brawls amongst us over the spoils. How will you prevent such brawls?" "Each chieftain shall make a pile for his own tribe, of what his own tribe have slain. We will make our war plan such that it is clear which tribe will be attacking which foes. There will doubtless be some small squabbles, but not large ones. And the chieftains will be more inclined to feel that it is they that lead the war effort. It will make them easier to persuade," Arnak explained. "But it will cut away at my esteem amongst the chieftains," Hachkanuk said. "Only at first. You will have the campaign to win them over," Arnak offered. Hachkanuk was not pleased by the demand, yet he found it a workable compromise to gain the armed men he would need for the great raid he envisioned. The shaman nodded. "What else?" Hachkanuk asked. "Two more conditions only. First, that you use your powers to persuade the spirits to make their will known that I should be chieftain of the Osprey tribe," said Arnak. In truth, he had no such ambition, but if Hachkanuk thought it so, then the shaman would believe that Arnak was brought to the shaman's service. Surprise showed on Hachkanuk's face. He had expected some conditions for greater booty in exchange for Arnak's role in convincing other chieftains to join the fray. He had not considered the man might be possessed of a streak of ambition. Truly, the Osprey need a bold and courageous man of vision, Hachkanuk agreed. "And finally, I would like to visit your Argosian woman tonight," Arnak said. Hachkanuk had already planned to use the woman as a bribe, so he nodded. Arnak then extended his hand to the man, and they clasped wrists. Hachkanuk roared to the picks of the crow, "The Osprey will take up the spear with us!" There was cheering and a great deal of warriors patting Arnak's shoulders. Hachkanuk sat back in his place and drank stolen wine from his horn. He had no doubt now that the task of convincing the Picts to rise up against the Cimmerians would succeed. And after Cimmeria, we will turn north against the hated Vanir, and south against the Aquilonians. In a decade or two, we Picts will return the entire West to the way it was meant to be. Hachkanuk allowed himself to indulge in his inner fantasies of domination and worship. While the Picts ate and drank, they would at times break out into chanting. One or two of them would grab a passing slave wench and force her to please him on the spot. At the display, Katnook flinched and moved closer to Arnak. Lear lay exhausted by Shile's side. The coolness of the cavern did not quell their ardor, yet even young, willing flesh must accede to the price of exertion. Shile's arm and leg were draped over Lear's body. He felt a languidity seep into him that made him content to lay there with her forever. He would be content to sleep, and was about to allow himself the luxury, when he felt the familiar ghostly hands come upon him. "Go away," he muttered. "No. Comfy," Shield replied, though her eyes were closed. Rain began to fall outside, and thunder pealed in the distance. The phantasmal goddesses were stroking Lear's hair, and he tried to ignore them. He rolled over onto his side. "Go away, you're no help," Lear muttered. The goddesses would not leave, however. They wished to communicate with him, and they would remain until he acknowledged them. In Lear's vision, one of the women walked around the sleeping couple. It was the goddess with the red hair and who wore the dress of leaves. Her apparition knelt and touched Shile on the shoulder. Lear was sure now that he would have proof that the apparitions were a delusion of his mind, for though Shile was not human, she was clearly real. Yet the ethereal hand did not pass through her. Instead, Shile opened her eyes and looked to see who had touched her. She smiled at the apparition and rose to her knees. Then Shile prostrated herself before the ghostly image. The apparition smiled at Shile and placed both its palms on the top of her head. Then the three goddesses vanished from Lear's sight. "What are they?" he asked Shile. "Morigu, the great good queens," she replied. "You do not know?" Lear shook his head. Then he noticed that in Shile's hair a streak of brown color had appeared. He touched it and held it. It reminded him of a tree losing its leaves for the winter. He looked at Shile with concern. "Each time they take from me, each time a little I wither. I hold back from them," she told him. Then she kissed Lear with great passion and sorrow. He knew he could not stop the tears that began at the corners of his eyes. "You gave me all you had left, all of your power," he asked. He would never be able to forgive himself if, because of him, she should perish. She nodded. "Not much time. Much to teach I must," she whispered. Lear nodded. It was all real. The ghosts, the clearing, the dreams. His mother had been right when she called him an abomination. Cimmerians believed that men should not be sorcerers and that magic was untrustworthy. Clearly he had been cursed. He had been cursed, and now the horrible and vile sorcerer's power resided in him. Fear of eternal punishment in some underworld passed through him. Yet before him, grasping his hand, was a woman of legend, a being of an elder age. Could the three goddesses that haunted his vision have given him magical power? He had never heard of any Cimmerian gods ever doing so. He resolved that if he was damned, he would at least do some good with the power the black arts had given him before his end. "Where do we start?" he asked. "Shamans show you sign?" Shile asked him. Then she drew the figure of Jebel Sag in the air. "Yes," he replies. "He used it to command a large snake." "Shaman not know all sign can do." "Shile knows." "Shile teach you," she replied. She held his hands and aided him in drawing the sign with a precision and intent that Hachkanuk would never possess. There were subtleties in the sign of Jebel Sag that Hachkanuk had never noticed. Subtleties born of a desire to know and respect, rather than to control and bind. As they worked, Lear could sense the being the sign called for, a great hybrid thing that lay just outside of normal ken. "Is it a demon?" he asked Shile. "No, it is old. as old as wind and water, as old as sun and moon. It has no evil, it has no good. It has only kinship. The more you call, the more it listens. The more you ate animals, the more it notices, Shao told him. In old, old days, Sog was what kept insects from biting, kept wolves from feeding on men. It asks only this: do not be cruel. Kill to eat or defend only. Never waste. Honor that you kill. I can understand you better. How's that possible? Lear asked. We are of one blood now, she replied. She dipped her fingers in a bowl filled with body paint. On Lear's face, she marked him with a pair of lines from the sign. Lear could see now that the lines of the sign each had their own individual animal they harmonized with and honored. Close your eyes. Think of nothing, she ordered. Lear obeyed. Now see the great hunting cats. Feel your skin change. You have their feet, their tail, their fur. You have their ears that hear, their whiskers that feel. But most of all, you have their eyes. Think of looking through your new eyes and open them. Now, she told Lear. He opened his eyes, and to his amazement the chamber, which before had been only dimly lit with moonlight, was now nearly as bright as day to him. Shyle smiled at him, pleased. Most quickly you learn, she exclaimed. Right now this is easy. You are in a place of power. Later it will take a day of meditating on the animal, and sometimes herbs. But only one aspect of an animal, at one time, should you ever borrow from Jebel Sag. I will remember, he said hoarsely. There is more. The sign, when drawn, as you saw, can make animals that remember become calm and cease their aggression. But not all remember. With time, you can make them remember. It takes skill. The sign can also let you call them to you, as you saw Hachkanuk do. The sign can, with time and practice, be used to command them to do tasks for you. And the greatest Darewoods of old, they could see through the eyes of the animals they knew. Animals will sense the power in you. From now on, you will find them prone to be friendly with you. They have become afraid of men, but you are now a herald for them, not unlike a bard that carries news between camps, or a judge that walks a circuit. She almost swooned, and Lear caught her. We should stop, he said. No, more. There is more, she whispered. She took up a stone and placed it in his palm. Then she tossed it across the cave and into the dark. She placed his hand on the ground. Where is the stone? She asked him. Then she began humming. Lear was about to say he did not know, when he suddenly knew where the stone was, not in a general sense of over there or that way, but in exact detail. The stone lay 7 feet and 3 inches from him at an angle of 27 degrees. He could feel it in his hand. Songline, she whispered. All things of the earth are part of the song. With this song, you can tell the distance of where you are to where you have been. You will always know the way home, she said. Sing with me, of home. And he did. The ancient words burned into his mind. Since his youth, he had the peculiar ability that anything to which he was exposed he could remember with perfect detail. The song of Shyle was comforting, and full of longing at the same time. The humming became a kind of chorus between them and the stone. She opened her eyes in shock, for Lear's focus of where he envisioned home of being had shifted. She trembled in his arms, for he no longer was thinking of Samaria, the dun in which he was raised, or the house in which he had felt a prisoner. He was thinking of this cave, and of her. It's unfair, she whispered. What could he say? One last gift, Shyle said to him. She intoned a deep chord in her throat, and Lear felt something pass from her spirit and into his own. There are places in these woodlands where my kind still live. Hidden folk, hidden wives, and other names the Picts call us. I have mingled my voice with yours, that when you speak, they will know that you were mine. Were? Lear asked trepidatiously. They heard the gate being moved, and the light of a torch neared. Shyle, afraid of the flames, cowered behind Lear. He balled up his fists and waited for whatever was coming to appear. He did not have long to wait. A trio entered the cave. It was Arnak who held the torch, and with him were 2 Cimmerian women he had been given by Hotchkanook. At the sight of Shyle, the women gripped at Arnak's arms out of reflex. But the Pict was unafraid. He gently removed the women's grip and gave them the torch. He approached Lear with open palms and said the language of Shyle's people. For the indignity and harm you have suffered, noble Art Goswain, I can offer no appropriate redress. But not all of the proud ones have forgotten the older ways. If you will let me, I will aid you in escaping from this madman called Hotchkanook. I, Arnak, son of the Osprey, so swear it will be done. Shyle peered around the side of Lear. She approached the Pict carefully. She laid a hand on his chest and closed her eyes. Then she turned to Lear, mystified, and said, He speaks the truth. At the sound of her voice, the Cimmerian women gasped. The stark contrast between the reactions to the she-woman and his own caused Lear to realize how quickly he had accepted Shyle. He turned to face Arnak. Words are pretty. We need action, he said to the Pict. Agreed. You know Cat and Oak. I cannot pronounce their Cimmerian names, Arnak said. Yes, I know them, Lear said. Arnak motioned for the women to put the torch down and join them. Only Oak, Grania, was brave enough. Arnak drew with a finger a quick representation of the Crow camp. He was about to begin detailing his idea when Lear stopped him. Lear finished the diagram of the camp with his own finger. Arnak did not protest. Arnak placed stones on the rough map to represent the guards. The camp guards would be easy to catch unawares if we can strike them all at once. We can thin their numbers. Once we have slain about, 10 or so of them, we can then make a run through the camp with torches, set fire to the camp to distract them, and lead your women outside of the camp to safety. Lear commented, Until the Picts follow at the war ready, unless you have an ambush spot to lure them to. I do indeed, Arnak said. He drew a second rough map a little apart from the one of the camp. On this map he depicted the rising hillside to the east of the camp and a place where a waterfall fed a creek. Lear knew it, having seen it when he was brought to the camp after his resurrection from the dead. There are plenty of good-sized rocks here to throw and hurl, and I have heard that Hotchkanook's hunters have stored knives, spears, and darts there. We can lead your women there and set up an ambush. Between the rise, the dawn light in their eyes, and the weaponry, I'm sure we can discourage them from following. But only if we can counter the power of the shaman. I have seen him command panthers to kill. Arnak paused, momentarily overcome with revulsion from the memory. He continued, A friend of mine. He will have no compunctions about using the predators of the forest upon us. I was hoping that the Art Goswain could help with that. Shyle shook her head sadly. She said, I am fading. I will go to sleep shortly after dawn today, not to reawaken for many, many decades. Cat and Oak did not understand what she said, but the expression on Lear's and Arnak's faces told them that the men did, and it was not good news that Shyle had related. Lear touched the woman's hand with evident dismay. I can counter Hotchkanook, Lear said. You are new. It is dangerous, she replied. It is more dangerous to wait, Lear replied. Can we not kill the man in his sleep? Cat asked. He has creatures that defend his slumber. There is no guarantee of success, Shyle said, and Lear translated for the two women. I will try it, Oak said. No, Arnak barked. The power of his order surprised the others in the cave. Oak said to him, Let me try. We, all of us, we are burdened with what has happened here. Please, I want to kill him. I will go to him and say that I am there to pleasure him, and then with a knife or a rock... No, I forbid it. I will not let him harm you, Arnak hissed. Oak looked away for a moment. It's not like he hasn't used me before. He enjoys it. Arnak, what of the Pict women? Lear asked. What do you mean? Arnak asked. They cannot love the treatment they have received. What if they could be persuaded to aid us? Lear said. How would we do that? Arnak asked earnestly, not dismissing the idea. We convince them to poison the Picts' water. All they have to do is not drink. Between the poisoning and the murdered guards, they can always claim that the Cimmerian women did it. They might even be eager to do this, as the Picts here have abused them in different ways than the slaves, but no less cruelly, Lear said. Arnak pondered it. It would mean a day of planning, a day for someone to change their mind. Not if we hurry, Lear replied. Arnak looked at Oak and Cat. I prefer that to the thought of one of you in his hands. If we risk this, can you inspire enough of the women to be at the places I have marked on the map? I think so, said Oak. We will try, Cat said. Good. Then it is a plan, Arnak said. He held his hand for Lear to clasp. The Cimmerian did so. This feels strange, admitted Lear. I agree. Yet you and I are the only two men in this entire village. We must act as men and defend those that cannot defend themselves, Arnak said to Lear. Agreed, said Lear. Sadly, not all of the women wish to be free, said Oak. No sooner had she said this than Oak suddenly sliced Cat across the throat with a jagged rock. The rough edge of the shard opened up the woman's neck and blood poured out all over the cave floor. The men looked at Oak with uncomprehending horror, and Shiel turned her face away from the evidence. Oak waved the men away as they reflexively went to aid the dying woman, who gurgled softly and incoherently before expiring. What is the meaning? Arnak asked. She'd have revealed our plot. She was spying on you for Hachganuk. She has reported to him of all your doings. I have seen her speaking softly into the wind. Somehow the sorcerer hears her words. I could not let him hear her warning. We have not much time, perhaps only until the morning, before he notices she is not reporting your doings, Oak said. Then she dropped the rock. She looked at the men and her hands began to shake. She asked them, I've never killed anyone before. I'm supposed to feel guilt, aren't I? Why don't I feel bad? Why? Arnak embraced her and let her cry for the loss of part of her soul. His eyes met Lear's. I do not care which one of us does it, but Hachganuk must die, Arnak said. I agree fully. The crows will notice the cat is missing, Lear said. If we kill the shaman, the tribe will fall apart, won't it? Oak asked hopefully. No, Arnak replied. They will simply peck out who will be the new leader. All the while they will still have the women under their guard. Also, as you have pointed out, not all the women apparently wish to be saved. We may be involved in only a last act of defiance. Then we save the ones that we can. Oak will go amongst the women, and those that she trusts to have the motivation to flee will aid us. It means that you and I will have to double up on the killing of the sentries, said Lear. Arnak replied, That is unwise. We two are simply not enough to assure that we can kill so many men quietly and without notice. What else can we do? Wait for the morning and the shaman's tender retribution when he finds his agent slain? Lear asked. Arnak nodded. He said, Very well. It is a gamble then. Let's hope the ancestors favor us over the crows. I will aid you as well, Shiel interjected, though I have never killed before. Lear could have encouraged her with words of bravado, but he knew that soon she would discover how easily one could end a life.